Hello, squirrels! All I've got done today is wash this mop. I did put a little lipstick on for you, but that's it. I'm sorry. When I don't go live, and I'm sorry I didn't get to reading yesterday. It was just one of those days. One of those days. What am I doing on my phone? Let's be on this. Didn't get the book up yet, but it won't take too long. Maybe, baby. Maybe, baby. This stuff. This will be the fiber for the day tomorrow. Y'all get a sneak peek. This is all I got the other day when I went. Oh my gosh. It is so soft. I may put these two together in a fall cowl. Striped or something. Golly, it's soft. Soft. What is it? This color is called redwood, and this color is called apricot. 180 yards, and each one 100% acetate. So soft. And it is Stitch 101 acetate, which they still, I'm sorry, I forgot to turn off the notifications. They still sell this, but I guess, it was the dye lot thing, I guess. Those two were just sitting there one day when I went. Come on now. Don't be weird. Do not be weird. How y'all doing? I hope good. Okay, let's see. The last thing we said, or I read, was, if Mr. Sidney could see you now, he wouldn't think you such an angel anymore, added Fanny, tossing a beanbag in her head at the same time. Polly was mad. Her face was very red, her eyes very bright, and her lips twitched, but she held her tongue and began to swing as hard as she could, fearing to say something she would be sorry for afterward. For a few minutes no one spoke. Tom whistled and Maud hummed, but Fan and Polly were each soberly thinking of something, for they had reached an age when children, girls especially, begin to observe, contrast, and speculate upon the words, acts, manners, and looks of those about them. A good deal of thinking goes on in the heads of these shrewd little folks, and the elders should mind their ways, for they get criticized pretty sharply and imitated very closely. Two little things had happened that day, and the influence of a few words, a careless action, was still working in the active minds of the girls. Mr. Sidney had called, and while Fanny was talking with him, she saw his eye rest on Polly, who sat apart watching the faces round her with a modest, intelligent look which many found so attractive. At that minute, Madam Shaw, S-H-A-W, came in and stopped to speak to the little girl. Polly rose at once and remained standing till the old lady passed on. "Are you laughing at Polly's prim ways?" Fanny had asked as she saw Mr. Sidney smile. "No, I'm admiring Miss Polly's fine manners," he answered in a grave, respectful tone, which had impressed Fanny very much, for Mr. Sidney was considered by all the girls as a model of good breeding, and that indescribable something which they called elegance. Fanny wished she had done that little thing and won that approving look, for she valued the young man's good opinion, because it was so hard to win, by her set at least. So when Polly talked about old people, it recalled this scene and made Fan cross. Polly was remembering how, when Mrs. Shaw came home that day in her fine visiting costume, and Maud ran to welcome her with unusual affection, she gathered up her lustrous silk and pushed the little girl away impatiently. "Don't touch me, child, your hands are dirty." Then the thought had come to Polly that the velvet cloak didn't cover a right motherly heart, that the fretful face under the nodding purple plumes was not a tender motherly face, and that the hands in the delicate primrose gloves had put away something very sweet and precious. She thought of another woman whose dress never was too fine for little wet cheeks to lie against, or loving little arms to press, whose face, in spite of many lines and gray hairs above it, was never sour or unsympathetic when children's eyes turned towards it, and whose hands never were too busy, too full, or too nice to welcome and serve the little sons and daughters who freely brought their small hopes and fears, sins and sorrows to her, who dealt out justice and mercy with such wise love. Ah, that's a mother, thought Polly, as the memory came warm into her heart, making her feel very rich and pity Maud for being so poor. This it was that caused such sudden indignation at Fanny's dreadful speech, and this it was that made quick-tempered Polly try to calm her wrath before she used toward Fanny's mother the disrespectful tone she so resented toward her own. As the swing came down after some dozen quick journeys to and fro, Polly seemed to have found a smile somewhere up aloft, for she looked toward Fan, saying pleasantly as she paused a little in her airy exercise, "I'm not mad now. Shall I come and toss with you?" "No, I'll come and swing with you," answered Fanny, quick to feel the generous spirit of her friend. "You are an angel, and I'll never be so rude again," she added as Polly's arm came round her and half the seat was gladly offered. "No, I ain't, but if I ever get it all like one, it will be Mother's preaching that did it," said Polly, with a happy laugh. "Good for you, Polly Peacemaker," cried Tom, quoting his father and giving them a grand push as the most appropriate way of expressing his approbation of the sentiment. Nothing more was said, but from that day there slowly crept into the family more respect for Grandma, more forbearance with her infirmities, more interest in her little stories, and many a pleasant gossip did the dear old lady enjoy with the children as they gathered round her fire, solitary so long. And that's all of chapter, whatever that was, 6, Grandma. So, since that was only a little less than 8 minutes, we'll go on with chapter 7, called Goodbye. "Oh dear, must you really go home Saturday?" said Fan some days after what Tom called the grand scrimmage. "I really must, for I only came to stay a month, and here I've been nearly 6 weeks," answered Polly, feeling as if she had been absent a year. "Make it 2 months and stay over Christmas. Come, do now," urged Tom heartily. "You're very kind, but I wouldn't miss Christmas at home for anything. Besides, Mother says they can't possibly do without me." "Neither can we. Can't you tease your mother and make up your mind to stay?" began Fan. "Polly never teases. She says it's selfish, and I don't do it now much," put in Maud with a virtuous air. "Don't you bother, Polly. She'd rather go, and I don't wonder. Let's just be as jolly as we can while she stays." "And finish up with your party, Fan," said Tom in a tone that settled the matter. Polly had expected to be very happy in getting ready for the party, but when the time came, she was disappointed, for somehow that naughty thing called envy took possession of her and spoiled her pleasure. Before she left home, she thought her new white muslin dress with its fresh blue ribbons the most elegant and proper costume she could have. But now, when she saw Fanny's pink silk with a white tarlatan tunic and innumerable puffings, bows, and streamers, her own simple little toilet lost all its charms in her eyes and looked very babyish and old-fashioned. Even Maud was much better dressed than herself and looked very splendid in her cherry-colored and white suit with a sash so big she could hardly carry it, and little white boots with red buttons. They both had necklaces and bracelets, earrings and brooches, but Polly had no ornament except the plain locket on a bit of blue velvet. Her sash was only a wide ribbon tied in a simple bow and nothing but a blue snood in the pretty curls. Her only comfort was the knowledge that the modest tucker drawn up around the plump shoulders was real lace, and that her bronze boots cost $9. Poor Polly, with all her efforts to be contented and not to mind looking unlike other people, found it hard work to keep her face bright and her voice happy that night. No one dreamed what was going on under the muslin frock till Grandma's wise old eyes spied out the little shadow on Polly's spirits and guessed the cause of it. When dressed, the three girls went up to show themselves to the elders who were in Grandma's room, where Tom was being helped into an agonizingly stiff collar. Maud pranced like a small peacock, and Fan made a splendid curtsy as everyone turned to survey them. But Polly stood still, and her eyes went from face to face with an anxious, wistful air which seemed to say, "I know I'm not right, but I hope I don't look very bad." Grandma read the look in a minute, and when Fanny said with a satisfied smile, "How do we look?" she answered, drawing Polly toward her so kindly, "Very like the fashion plates you got the patterns of your dresses from, but this little costume suits me best." "Do you really think I look nice?" And Polly's face brightened, for she valued the old lady's opinion very much. "Yes, my dear, you look just as I like to see a child of your age look. What particularly pleases me is that you have kept your promise to your mother and haven't let anyone persuade you to wear borrowed finery. Young things like you don't need any ornaments but those you wear tonight: youth, health, intelligence, and modesty." As she spoke, Grandma gave a tender kiss that made Polly glow like a rose. For a minute she forgot that there were such things as pink silk and coral earrings in the world. She only said, "Thank you, ma'am," and hardly returned the kiss, but the words did her good, and her plain dress looked charming all of a sudden. "Polly's so pretty it don't matter what she wears," observed Tom, surveying her over his collar with an air of calm approval. "She hasn't got any bwettles. Trying to figure out this, Maud, to her dress." "And I have," said Maud, settling her ruffled bands over her shoulders, which looked like cherry-colored wings on a stout little cherub. "I did wish you'd just wear my blue set. Ribbon is so very plain, but as Tom says, it don't much matter." And Fanny gave an effective touch to the blue bow above Polly's left temple. "She might wear flowers. They always suit young girls," said Mrs. Shaw, privately thinking that her own daughters looked much the best, yet conscious that blooming Polly had the most attractive face. "Bless me, I forgot my posies in admiring the bells. Hand them out, Tom," and Mr. Shaw nodded toward an interesting-looking box that stood on the table. Seizing them wrong side up, Tom produced 3 little bouquets, all different in color, size, and construction. "Why, Papa, how very kind you are," cried Fanny, who had not dared to receive even a geranium leaf since the last scrape. "Your father used to be a very gallant young gentleman once upon a time," said Mrs. Shaw with a simper. "Ah, Tom, it's a good sign when you find time to think of giving pleasure to your little girls." And Grandma patted her son's bald head as if he wasn't more than 18. Thomas Jr. had given a somewhat scornful sniff at first, but when Grandma praised his father, the young man thought better of the matter and regarded the flowers with more respect, as he asked, "Which is for which?" "Guess," said Mr. Shaw, pleased that his unusual demonstration had produced such an effect. The largest was a regular hothouse bouquet of tea roses, scentless heath, and smilax. The second was just a handful of sweet peas and mignonette, with a few cheerful pansies and one fragrant little rose in the middle. The third a small posy of scarlet verbenas, white feverview, and green leaves. Not hard to guess. The smart one for Fan, the sweet one for Polly, and the gay one for Pug. "Now then, catch hold, girls," and Tom proceeded to deliver the nosegays with as much grace as could be expected from a youth in a new suit of clothes and very tight boots. "That finishes you off just right, and is a very pretty attention of Papa's. Now run down, for the bell has rung, and remember not to dance too often, Fan. Be as quiet as you can, Tom. And Ma, don't eat too much supper. Grandma will attend to things, for my poor nerves won't allow me to come down." With that, Mrs. Shaw dismissed them, and the four descended to receive the first batch of visitors. Several little girls, who had been asked for the express purpose of keeping Maud out of her sister's way. Tom had likewise been perpetuated by being allowed to bring his three bosom friends, who went by the schoolboy names of Rumple, Sherry, and Spider. They will do to make up sets, as gentlemen are scarce and the party is for Polly, so I must have some young folks on her account, said Fanny when sending out her invitations. Of course, the boys came early and stood about in corners, looking as if they had more arms and legs than they knew what to do with. Tom did his best to be a good host, but ceremony oppressed his spirits, and he was forced to struggle manfully with the wild desire to propose a game of leapfrog, for the long drawing rooms, cleared for dancing, tempted him sorely. Let me get rid of some of this junk up here.